What is the scariest, creepiest theory you know about? Okay, this one is rough, so please bear with me. So the common time travel question is, would you go back and kill baby Hitler? Well, imagine if that was you. To us in the current timeline, you would be a hero that killed someone truly evil before they had chance to corrupt or endanger anyone, but to the people of that time you are a monster, a baby killer. They couldn't exactly explain to people, I was sent from the future to kill this baby to save hundreds of millions of lives. No one would believe him and would just assume he was some nutcase, or maybe they're not allowed to tell anyone as per the agreement with the future government. It makes you wonder, all the people through time that have been called monsters for killing babies, what if they were just heroes from the future saving us all? They couldn't tell anyone either. I need to go to sleep, but I can't put my phone away because of this thread. This isn't a theory, but I just think it's cool. You know how movies and shows always have this ancient alien race that came way before us, and we're the new species? Well, technically, most likely that's wrong. We are near the beginning of the universe. If the universe was a person, we would literally just be out of the womb. In reality, we are the ancient species. We are the ones that come before, we are the ones some future civilization may see. Just a crazy thing to think about. I find numbers stations to be pretty creepy. Their purpose is technically a theory, as the groups that broadcast them won't officially confirm even their existence for the most part. Essentially, spying is still a very real thing for most world governments. One of the most foolproof ways of delivering a coded message is through a one-time code. A code used just once before being discarded. Your spy has the key, you have the message, and once the key is used it is discarded and the next message is sent using a different key. Additionally, shortwave radio is an extremely secure way of sending these messages. It sounds weird that a radio station anyone with a shortwave radio can listen to would be considered secure. But the beauty of the method is that shortwave radios are ubiquitous, cheap technology throughout most of the world. What looks more suspicious, a person traveling with a radio, or a person traveling with a sophisticated computer or satellite phone? While the signal can be received by anyone, it leaves no record of who received it and can't be intercepted and traced by a middleman. They don't care if you listen, because the stream of numbers is nothing without the code. And because you're using a one-time code, it can't be cracked as it's randomly generated and used once. The only time a one-time code has ever been broken was an instance where the code was reused. So your spy just tunes into the radio at a specific time on a specific day, writes down the numbers, decodes the message, discards the key, and no one is any the wiser. Most stations are identified by a call sign or little jingle, and these can range from kind of cute and cheerful to pretty eerie sounding. If you listen in frequently, you'll hear messages repeated over and over until one day they change up. It's believed they'll repeat the message until their spy can communicate they've received it. Essentially, if you have a shortwave radio, you can listen in on highly secret spy communications from countries all over the world. You can also listen in on countries jamming the communication, either by broadcasting state radio on the same signal, or trying to jam it with noise or static. You'd think the frequency of these transmissions would have gone down after the Cold War, but they're still going strong. The very first numbers stations appeared in the very early days of radio, during World War I. I find it fascinating, but also super creepy, that all of this secret communication is happening right out in the open, for us to tune into at any time, without any way of knowing who it is intended for or what is being transmitted. That a robot could fail the Turing test if it wanted to. Telling this story makes me feel uncomfortable, even today, so I will tell it here. I don't know how much this story fits into this thread, but I've never had a platform that seemed appropriate to share it, so here we go. When I was 20, 14 years ago, I moved from Iowa to Boulder, Colorado with my best friend Corey. We moved there during the month of August, and shortly thereafter I got a phone call from a number I didn't know. I answered it, and it turned out to be this girl that had attended the same high school as us, Ashley. Ashley had heard that Corey and I had just moved to Boulder, and she was calling because she, too, had just moved to Boulder to attend CU. She wanted to know if we wanted to get together sometime and hang out, party. Ashley was a couple of years younger than us and we didn't run in the same crowds, so we didn't hang out much. But I remember her coming over to our apartment to smoke and chill once. Then I remember asking her to get us weed. She did. She came with us to a party once, and I also remember us asking her for weed a second time, and her texting me back saying, "You guys just message me when you want weed." So no, after that I don't think we talked to her again. Fast forward 3-4 years, Corey and I are living back in Iowa. One night, I was out with a couple of people I'd gone to high school with, and we went to this dive bar called Thumbs. In the back of Thumbs there is a single pool table, which is where my group went because we had planned on playing. We got to the pool table, and there's Ashley, racking a set of pool balls. I was super surprised to see her there, so I walked right up to her and said something like, "Ashley, long time no see, what are you doing here? Did you move back from Boulder?" Ashley just stared at me for a second and then said, "What?" So I repeat myself and say, "Did you move back from Colorado? I haven't seen you since we hung out in Boulder." She looked truly confused, and then she said, "What are you talking about? I never lived in Boulder." At this point I thought she was fucking with me because I specifically remembered hanging out with her more than once. So I laughed and was like, "You're fucking with me, right?" She shook her head no, and one of the girls I was with, who knew both of us, actually overheard it and butted in to confirm that Ashley had lived in our hometown the whole time. I completely dropped the subject to save face, but the experience was so unsettling that I made a beeline for the front door. I walked out onto the sidewalk, pulled my phone out of my pocket, and called Corey. I said, "Corey, do you remember when we lived together in Boulder and Ashley came over and hung out with us?" And Corey said, "No man, that never happened. He was my best friend, so I knew he wasn't fucking with me. Plus there was a 0% chance he and Ashley had ever talked to set something like this up." When I pressed the issue, he insisted that no one we had gone to high school with had ever moved out to Boulder, and that we certainly hadn't hung out with them. Since then, I've brought this up to Corey several times and his position has never changed. To this day, I don't know what happened. I specifically remember hanging out with her. She wore a tie-dye t-shirt when she came over the first time, and we hung out with her multiple times. I remember it so clearly. I still have those memories, but apparently they never happened, even though the timeline matches exactly. She would have graduated high school that year and moved to Colorado in August for school. I know that the human memory is super unreliable, and I'm sure that's all this is, but that doesn't change that I am absolutely 100% fucking sure that this happened. 14 years later and I still stand by my story, wrong as it may be. Crazy story. I've some questions, maybe answering them could help to find the truth. You said in Iowa you and Ashley were no close friends. How did she react when you approached her so warmly? Did you ask Corey one time about that weed girl from Boulder, without mentioning Ashley, Maybe the whole story did happen, but you mixed up Ashley with the real weed girl. Are there any other friends in Boulder, who could recognize Ashley, who were closer to her? This whole story is crazy, I would love to get this solved. Sure. I remember thinking Ashley had a surprised look after my warm welcome at the bar that night. Like I said, she was younger, small high school. She wanted to be like the cool older kids, so it makes sense she would be a little weirded out by me being so friendly randomly seeing her in a bar. I treated her like an old friend, but she only knew me as someone who she went to high school with. This has crossed my mind over the years, but my memory is 110% insistent that it was a girl from our high school. and it was within the first few weeks of us moving out there. We didn't know anybody yet. Corey and I still talk about this story today, and we've been over all the details. If there were another weed girl, we'd have put that together. I have always thought that there was a very slight chance it was not Ashley, that maybe I had gotten Ashley mixed up with a girl named Amanda, who was the same age. The problem with this is that Amanda was the little sister of my ex-girlfriend, and there's no way I would have gotten them mixed up with that fact in mind. I would have remembered if my ex-girlfriend's little sis moved to Colorado. I also contacted Amanda on Facebook several years ago to ask her if she'd ever lived in Colorado, and she said number. And to those of you saying it's the weed and the partying, it's just not. There are a lot of effects that those two things can have on you, but I've never experienced anything like this in my life. Sober or not, weed might make your memory hazy, but it doesn't give you false ones. Again, I acknowledge that this is almost certainly some weird type of misremembering some detail some way, or a combination of dreams manifesting themselves in my memory, or something. I don't know. I'm just saying that nothing like this has ever happened to me before, or since that incident. Edit. If anyone is interested, one avenue I can pursue is this: the person who interrupted Ashley and I's conversation at the bar to confirm Ashley's story is my ex-girlfriend, and we still talk every now and again. I don't recall if I've ever asked her about it. I'm leaning towards number, but I can ask her if she remembers anything about that night. I think the most probable thing that happened is that you had a very vivid dream that your brain is confusing as reality after the fact. There are times where I've questioned briefly if a dream was a memory or not to that extent of vividness or lucidity, though, because I can pass that it was a dream in end.